The supreme Christ, new humanity, and a church called to unity and maturity. Ephesians lifts our eyes to who we are in Christ, then shows us how to walk. This is Seek, Go, Create. You're listening to Read the New Testament in 90 days, 27 books, in order, in context. We're walking through the New Testament the way it was written so you can hear it the way the first churches did, in context. Just want to keep reminding you, make sure that you're going to our hub page, k2m.foundation/NT90. We're adding new information there, adding the links to all the episodes so it can be one place that you can go to get everything for this plan. And you could download a printable plan there also. Make sure you check that out. Today, we are in Ephesians, a meditation on the mystery revealed in Christ. Some key facts. Let's dive in. The author, we are confident that this is Paul, and we feel pretty good about the dates here. We discussed that when we talked about Romans. AD 60 to 61. So we're into the 60s, the amazing 60s that we're going to see a lot of activity, a lot of stuff happening. So buckle up. This is about to get really, really interesting. So we're around AD 60 for this one. The audience, it's a circular letter that's going to churches in Asia Minor, Ephesus, and the surrounding region. Here's the setting. It's been about 30 years since the resurrection. Paul is in prison, probably in Rome or Caesarea, and Tychicus carries the letter. All right, let's get some historical context. Since Romans, which was about 3 years ago, Paul has delivered the collection to Jerusalem. He made a trip there, and while he was there, he was arrested in the temple. He spent 2 years in the Caesarean prison, survived a shipwreck, and now writes from Rome in chains. I'm sorry, I'm sort of chuckling a little bit because it's kind of like, that's a lot of stuff going on. And he's about to write this letter that has some of the gentlest things in it after he's been through all this. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, I'm sorry. I do not mean to mock or laugh at anything that Paul went through. I just find that interesting as we read this letter in context. The man who penned Romans from Corinth with plans to visit Spain is now awaiting trial before Caesar. In Rome, Nero is on the throne. Paul is under house arrest, awaiting trial. He's chained up, but his pen isn't. And I picture, and again, this is my interjecting, but I picture there's a house. We know he was able to have people during this arrest, and there are Roman guards that are sitting there hearing Paul taking all these guests, probably dictating or writing a lot of these letters. And I am just fascinated with that scene. And I try to picture it in my mind as I read through some of these. Down in Jerusalem, the temple is still intact, and we are now into the 60s. And we know historically there are only 10 years before it is destroyed. The storm is gathering. Leadership senses the shift. The church, the Ephesian believers, and the surrounding region are mature churches that need vision. There's not any crisis that we're aware of going on. So this is not crisis management like some of Paul's letters are. Luke is interviewing eyewitnesses and compiling the most carefully researched account that we have. We'll get to Luke soon. The tension that's going on. There's no specific crisis that we're aware of. Paul writes to lift their eyes to the cosmic, the big scope of what God is doing. Why is he writing it now? He may be released or executed. He's not sure. He's writing from prison, and he's writing his most elevated vision of Christ and the church. Just picture as you read this, the author, Paul, is in chains. He is in chains as he writes this. He's writing about big vision, personal warmth from a Roman house arrest. Peter sees the suffering spreading and prepares believers to stand firm. That's something that's going on currently. That's what's going on at the same time. The old world, the old covenant is about to collapse. They can feel it coming. They sense it. You're going to start seeing that in some of the things that are written in these letters that are coming up. Here's what you'll encounter in Ephesians. It's exalted and practical at the same time. There is identity before activity. You'll hear about spiritual blessings, chosen before the foundation of the world, predestined for adoption, sealed with the Spirit. Powerful language from Paul. The mystery is revealed. Gentiles are fellow heirs, members of the same body. We'll hear about the dividing wall. It's been broken down in Christ. Jew and Gentile are made one in new humanity. We'll hear about the new temple. Keep in mind, the current temple still stands, but Paul is going to start talking about the new temple built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. He'll talk about walking worthy in humility, gentleness, patience, maintaining the unity of the Spirit. He'll talk about taking off the old self and putting on the new self. Put away falsehood, anger, theft, be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving, some practical things that was definitely good for that audience to hear, and of course, good for us to hear. And of course, the famous armor of God. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Stand firm. Sit with chapters 1 to 3 as identity, and then watch chapters 4 to 6 kind of be more related to activity that comes from that identity. Why this letter feels different. There's really no crisis to solve. There's no false teachers to correct. It's just Paul in chains painting the biggest picture he's painted up to this point. So enjoy Ephesians. What a great message from Paul. We're going to read Ephesians in one session. You can split it into two, but try to read it in one session and enjoy that. What's next? Oh, one of my favorites, Colossians. Christ supreme over all. It's kind of like the theme that Paul's into during this time. And we get a good bit of it in Ephesians, and we're going to get more of it in Colossians. Christ supreme over all. When you're tempted to add something to Christ, that letter answers Christ is all in all. Once again, make sure you're following along at k2m.foundation/NT90, getting all the information. One other thing to do, if you haven't been doing this, if you're doing this in order, if you're coming along later, you could kind of scroll back, but jump to the YouTube channel and our community there, or go find me, Tim Winders, on my personal Facebook page, because I'm actually reading along and adding some comments and thoughts along the way. And I'd love for you to jump in and share some things that you're seeing from reading this in context and in order. All right. Before you read Ephesians, let's set the scene. It's AD 60. You gather with your church somewhere in Asia Minor. Times are hard. There's pressure from your neighbors, whispers about this Jewish sect you've joined. You wonder how long you can hold on. Then Tychicus arrives, a familiar face. We've seen him before. He's carrying a scroll from Paul. You've heard the news. Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, beaten, imprisoned for 2 years in Caesarea. Shipwrecked on the way to Rome, now he sits in chains, awaiting trial before Caesar himself. You wonder, after all that, will he back off? Will the letter be cautious, guarded, defeated? Tychicus unrolls the scroll and begins to read, and what you hear isn't retreat. It's the highest, widest, deepest vision Paul has ever written. Christ above all. You seated with him, a mystery revealed, a new humanity, armor for the battle ahead. Chains didn't shrink Paul's faith, they expanded it. Now, let's read.